Wow. What an exciting game, folks. Good evening, WNBA and LA Sparks fans. Grab a wet washcloth, wipe off your brow, do it underneath your pits, do something, folks. What an exciting game tonight, folks, that we can recap tonight. And welcome in, folks, to the LA Sparks 365 Network, your 24/7, 365 coverage of home of the WNBA and your two-time WNBA champion, Los Angeles Sparks, folks. And quite literally, I worked up a sweat over here during that last 90 seconds of that game, folks. The Sparks come out on top for the first time in 5 weeks. They get a home win finally as they knock off the Indiana Fever 77-73. Good evening, everybody. Alongside Chris Mancy at the Internet Studios up in Anaheim, California. Cal McCoy joining you folks here for the second to last time almost here, third to last time here from Studio 121 in San Diego. Chris, holy cow, man. I mean, you know, the Sparks just don't make it easy on us, man. Whether we're watching the game as fans when we come on the network, man, they just don't make it easy on us, dude. All right, how are you hanging in there after this exciting game tonight for LA that they get a win, and above all, Chris, too, without Candace Parker in the lineup tonight because of her injured knee?
Just still exhausted and just I feel sorry for her. I don't know how Shorty Mom was feeling. Her birthday, and she just had a heart attack.
Chris, from my side of the story down here, dude, I mean, it's been pretty warm down here. We've been dealing with, thunderstorms down here, man. But right now, I mean, it's gotten so bad, dude, that I've had to bring in, a wet towel with me, as you guys have seen so far. And my fan is now on high, Chris, and not from the weather. But this game, I think, just did a number on everybody, Chris. And quite frankly, dude, it's a big win, though, for the Sparks. They get the win 77-73, dude. But, hey, not only that, they get back into a tie for third place. And, Chris, for once, they show everybody that they can finally win a game at home for the first time in 5 weeks. But the bigger story, though, Chris, is they win this game tonight without the MVP, Candace Parker, in the lineup, Chris. Before we get to the box score and the recap, dude, is this sort of a confidence booster for this team that they can go out there and finally show they can, for one, win at home for the first time in 5 weeks, though, but win without their big puzzle piece, though, in the reigning MVP and Candace Parker? I think, Chris, that this might be a confidence booster in, I don't know, could the Sparks possibly ruin that winning streak tomorrow night? We'll get to that later on, though, Chris. But your thoughts, though, about the Sparks winning at home for the first time in 5 weeks? Yes, but again, doing it without Candace Parker tonight.
Great team win by the Sparks. Doing it at home without Candace Parker. I think we'll get them momentum going, and we'll find out tomorrow if the Sparks could finally snatch that winning streak of the Phoenix Mercury.
Chris, also, I mean, Vicky Russo brought up this point, too, in the night as well, man, that it seems like since Carol Ross is firing, the team has sort of, that it looks like Chris Penny Toler's got this team steered back on track and back in the right direction, man, how the Sparks were very, very sluggish, a lot of turnovers under Carol Ross, and it looked like the offense wasn't clicking, but now, Chris, this kind of reminds me about the Lakers when Mike Brown got fired and they brought in Bernie Bickerstaff for a few games. How it was like a free-flowing open game. There was no real set plays. It would just go out there and play and kind of hope for the best, man. But I think so far, would you agree, though, on the aspect that it looks like Penny Toler's kind of been that remedy to cure this LA fever, perhaps, that's been kind of hogging them over the entire season?
Yep, agree. Just look like you just said, when fired of Mike Brown and Mike Bickerstaff, it looks like pretty much the same. Just go out there and hope for the best.
Again, folks, the Sparks with a red-hot, pretty much a sweating 77-73 win over the Indiana Fever, folks. That literally has made me sweat, folks. I had to change shirts, crank up the fan here. So, Chris, it's not only hot as far as weather goes, Chris, but there was certainly some high temperatures in Staples Center tonight and also in studio here watching this game tonight.
Yep, agree.
So, Chris, we'll get to the game recap instead of everyone seeing this green cloth go across my face and arms and anywhere else on my body here. But, Chris, again, the Sparks win 77-73. We'll get to the game line stats, though, first, Chris. And what a turn of events it was in this game. And Chris, I think I've already found the turning point of this game. There's a couple of them, though. But line score by quarter, Indiana in the first 23. Chris, what I think I see here, one of my turning points, Chris, is this. The Indiana second quarter. The Sparks held them to 8 points, and the Sparks put up 20. So that's the one culprit right now. We'll get to a couple more in a moment here. So again, for the Fever, 23 in the first, 8 in the second, 22 in the third, and 20 in the fourth. For LA, 15 in the first, 20 in the second, 19 in the third, 23 in the fourth, game total of 73. Now, Chris, my one first culprit we'll get to, Chris, is the Sparks shutting down Indiana and back to the punt, Chris, but again, curing that Fever in the second quarter, Chris, only holding them to 8 points. That is the second time, Chris, in both times the Sparks played Indiana and held them to below 10 points in a quarter. Chris, how big, though, looking at the big picture, how big, though, is that stop or that second quarter, Chris, where you held your opposition to 8 points, knowing that this game, Chris, went back and forth for the last 20 minutes of the game today?
A very great stoppage by the Sparks, because if it would have been more loud points, the Sparks probably would have lost again at home.
Chris, I'm going to get to another culprit here real quick, is the fourth quarter, Chris, involving Tamika Catchings, who rarely, Chris, rarely clanks free throws. She clanked a mammoth free throw that would have tied the game at 71. LA got the rebound and scored to go back ahead by 3, Chris. So I think that one miss was another dagger and claymore for the Fever tonight. But Chris, I mean, the Fever played great, though. Chris, this was sort of a recurring trend we saw in Game 1 between the two clubs a few weeks ago back in Indiana, Chris, how the Fever had that big lead and, again, couldn't hold on to it again. And, Chris, that's been the main talking point by Lynn Dunn and Stephanie Wine and the coach staff, Chris, of the Fever, is they get these leads, Chris, but they're kind of like, Chris, this is basically the Eastern Conference version of the Sparks, Chris, how the Fever, though, Chris, are better at home than they are on the road, where LA is vice versa, Chris. So it's basically, Chris, these are basically twin clubs almost, man, and, Indiana, man, they let another one get away, Chris, and, in your view, though, man, what's your turning point in the game? Is it the 8 points in quarter, or is it the possible, or is it the Catchings missed free throw that would have tied the game at 71 back in the fourth quarter at crunch time?
I think it was probably towards the end when Tamika Catching missed that free throw and probably did the game for the Sparks.
Chris, I'm going to go back to that second quarter, Chris, because L.A. was slow like normal. You can kind of, Chris, you know what? Let's just, pretty much put it down right now. The Sparks are going to suck in quarter one. Let's just go with that, and we know it's not going to be a very good first quarter. But, Chris, that second quarter, I think, is the main turning point, Chris, because if L.A. does not win that quarter, 20-8, and if they don't hold Indiana below 10, we could have Chris. We could be in overtime right now, perhaps, or Indiana could have won the game, perhaps. If they would have had a different shot, towards the end of the game, man. But at the same time, though, the free throw does loom large. But I still go back to that second quarter because LA turned it on finally and played some good basketball. And I'll tell you what, there was one possession that I absolutely loved in that second quarter, Chris. How the Sparks had like 5 or 6 chances. And Arminty Harrington comes in and cleans the glass with the big tip and to put them back up by 4. So, Chris, that was a big deal, too, is the Sparks out-rebounded, Chris. And they actually, for once, actually came to rebound tonight as well tonight, man. So there's a lot of big factors. But once more, your turning point of the game, though, was the Catchings free throw. I said the 8-point second quarter. Either way, though, man, either way, Chris, you got to look at it the big way, Chris, that if Indiana scores more than 10 in quarter 2 or, Meeks makes that free throw, we could be in overtime or Indiana would have won the game perhaps, Chris. So, I don't know, a couple of early Karima Christmas presents here in July for LA, so you take them any way you can, right?
Yep.
I think I'm on a roll tonight, folks, because we're getting all the cliches and all of the puns out there, folks. We'll get to the game box score, though, real quick, Chris. First for the Sparks, Nneka Ogwumike in place of Candace Parker. Pretty much, Chris takes over where the MVP left off on Saturday afternoon. 21 points for Nneka. Elena Beard came alive tonight. She had 17 points, including a big bucket towards the end of the game to put LA back up by 4. Christy Tolliver had 10. Jantel Lavender, 13. Arminty Harrington, a great game again, 9 points. But above all, Chris, Real quickly, though, she may have had 9 points, Chris, but 11 rebounds for Mindy tonight, Chris. So you know that she may not be scoring a lot, Chris, but she finds a way to help out in different fashions.
Yep.
So another great game for our Minty Harrington as well. And also tonight scoring Candace Wiggins and Faria Abd and Candace Wiggins and Sandrine Gruda had points as well. And of course, Chris, Candace Wiggins, Chris, she had LA's only three-point attempts tonight. She hit one of the two. And Sandrine Gruda had 2 points. Her only field goal attempt, of course, not playing tonight, Chris, was Abdi and Green, usual suspects. But again, Chris, for precaution reasons, Chris, Lindsey Harding and Candace Parker did not play. Harding is out right now with a bit of a sore foot, and of course, Candace Parker with her sore knee. Chris to the Fever again, who let one get away again, man. Tamika catching 16 points. Marissa Coleman had 6 in her first game back in LA. Orlando Larkins 10. Brianne January had 12. Shavante Zellos had 2. Natasha Howard had 5. And Karima Christmas 11. Lashid Clarendon had 4. And Lena Kaiser had 7. Maggie Lucas, no points, 2.5 minutes played. Sydney Carter and Crystal Thomas, DNPs. Lynn Dunn's decision. Arena stat-wise, folks, the game was at Staples Center in downtown L.A. Refereeing crew of Lamont Simpson, Billy Smith, and Jeff Wooten. And the time of the game, 1 hour and 53 minutes. And Chris, the staggering number, though, the game attendance is a season low for the Sparks, Chris. 6,431 at the Staples Center tonight, Chris. Scoring-wise, Chris, 16 different lead changes and 8 times tonight the teams were tied. Now, Chris, to the Sparks real quick. Again, we know about that. You're giving McKay pouring it in, but again, Chris, a few little injuries here. You don't want to kind of push them too far. We know that, Parker will probably play tomorrow night, Chris. It wouldn't surprise me one bit if Parker's back in lineup again tomorrow night. But again, Chris, some concern, though, for Lindsey Harding, Chris, who's had a bit of a downward spiral this season. A bit of a rough year, Chris, but again, foot injuries are one deal, Chris, as are knees in basketball. So, I mean, give them time. We'll probably, Chris, maybe 95% likely see Parker tomorrow in Phoenix in the big game. But, Chris, I think with Harding right now, I mean, we know that she's having a rough year. She's been on the bench lately, Chris, and she's been playing a little bit better as of late. But, again, foot and knee problems, Chris, in basketball are so tough to come back from. So, you know what? If it's Chris, why not send him out one more game, especially, Chris, if it's a back-to-back. I would actually be a lot better, I think, if LA did not play either of those two tomorrow. But then again, Chris, this is a big game playing Phoenix. But again, Chris, that number one's out of your reach, so at least go for 3 right now. But, Chris, at this point in time, though, now with 8 games to play and a back-to-back, do you want to, do you think that LA rests Harding and Parker again for one more game? Or do you think they both play tomorrow, knowing what's at stake here in this game again with Phoenix and a possible shot at 3rd place also on the line?
I think they probably might not play Harding. They might start Parker since it's a big game and trying to get 3rd place. Parker might play, but Harding might not play.
Yeah, Chris, at this point in time, as much as we need to see Parker play, Chris, I would actually advise them, I'd actually throw the flag here real quick and just say, sit out tomorrow too, Chris, because a back-to-back too, man. You're leaving at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning for Phoenix, Chris. You're leaving on game day, which is normally not a good sign, Chris, because you'll get in there a bit fatigued. But then again, Chris, we're not talking about, going 6 a.m. to, fly over to frickin', Connecticut or New York to play a 4 o'clock pack time game. You're going to Phoenix, Chris. So, I can kind of see that. But at the same time, though, Chris, you really, though, man, Harding, for one, could play perhaps depending on her knee or on her foot, Chris. I think with Parker, at this point in time, Chris, are you gunning to break the streak, or are you going there to play for 3rd place, Chris? As much as, I'd love to see Parker play, Chris, I would not be surprised at all, man, if she does not play, because, again, we're talking a back-to-back here, man, and you really don't want to have that knee get worse than what it already is right now. And then, Chris, we don't really know how bad that injury is right now, Chris, because we really, Chris, don't know from game to game she's even going to be playing, because we found out at, half an hour before game time, Chris, that she wasn't going to be playing, so it's kind of, hit and miss right now with knowing if Parker's going to play at all.
Yep, agreed. Or maybe she was just sitting today since her knee and resting up, so she could be 100% tomorrow in that big game against Phoenix, maybe.
Probably like she did last week when I got her autograph when they played the Liberty. Chris, we're going to go back over to the Fever real quick, Chris, on a more positive note, Chris, for the Fever. Chris, tonight was Lynn Dunn's final game coaching the Fever in Los Angeles, Chris. I'm sure you saw a tweet from the network, Chris, direct to the Indiana Fever Twitter handle. They favored the tweet, Chris, but I mean, you know, Lynn Dunn, Chris, has done so many great things, Chris, for women's basketball. She's been such a great ambassador. Over 40 years, Chris, coaching women's basketball, Chris, and she's done wonders in the WNBA, Chris, not only with the Fever, Chris, but for the entire league. She is a living legend, Chris, and I'm so happy that Lynn's going to be going into the Hall of Fame this year for basketball, along with Gail Goose and, of course, a few other people, Chris. Chris, your final thoughts about Lynn Dunn's final legacy in the WNBA, Chris, when she's devoted 40 years of her life. You know, she's old enough, Chris, to be our grandma, that she's been coaching basketball this long for over 40 years, Chris, and she's won a few WNBA titles. Chris, your final thoughts on her career, coaching, not just in the WNBA, Chris, but her whole career, Chris. 40 years, Chris, she's been coaching women's basketball. Chris, your final thoughts about Lynn Dunn's tremendous Hall of Fame caliber coaching career.
A great coaching career for her, and she's going to be missed.
Chris, she will be missed, and we will wish Lynn Dunn, Chris, all the best, of course, as we say a lot, Chris, not just for the Sparks, but for the entire league. We will wish Lynn Dunn all the best in her future endeavors, Chris, whatever that might be, Chris. I mean, you know, she's probably going to, just retire, and, you know, probably, sit on her couch and watch Fox Sports Indiana and watch her Fever play and not be there on a day-to-day basis with the club. But, Chris, back to the Fever, though, on the game night note, Chris, I'll tell you what, man. You know, we thought the Sparks were bad, Chris, at holding leads. Indiana has proved that they might be as worse as LA holding leads, Chris, because they have basically been, you know, Chris, I'm saying, this is basically, you know, a twin pairing, Chris, that the Sparks and Fever are so much alike. As far as goes with, you know, losing leads, you know, players getting injured, you know, and stuff like that, Chris. And again, man, you know, Indiana, Chris, blew a 13-point lead back at home. Tonight, Chris, they could not hold an 8-point lead in the first quarter, and they still found a way to squander it, Chris. I mean, you know, as much, Chris, as you can, you know, kind of pin it on Tamika Catchings' free throw, Chris, I think that this team, Chris, honestly, with the Fever, Chris, they are sort of like like LA, Chris, that they rely too heavily on one player, that'd be Tamika Catchings, Chris, and also they're a bit too inexperienced. I mean, you can have Lynn Dunn, you can have Coop, you can have Penny Toller, you can have Brondello, Chris. I mean, you can have, you know, the best coach in the world, Chris, but if you only have one solid player on your team, Chris, and you have, you know, people that are, you know, not really household WNBA names, Chris, I mean, Chris, you know, the people are a good team. You know, I'm not knocking them for at all, Chris, but it just seems like, Chris, that they're too inexperienced right now, and I don't know if that can carry them past the first round of the postseason if and when they get there, man. But you know, I think if they keep playing the same way, Chris, how they've blown leads in the second half, Chris, and if they keep relying so much on Tamika Catchings, Chris, they will not go far anytime soon, unfortunately, Chris. Your thoughts about the Fever, about Indiana tonight, Chris, and also their possible outlook for the remainder of the season, Chris? Guys, I think that they're going to get in the postseason one way or another, but I don't know how far they go, though, in the postseason.
Yeah, I think they'll probably get in the playoffs, probably like maybe the 4th seed. But I think they'll get probably swept out in the first round.
Indiana, by the way, folks, is trying to clinch their 10th consecutive WNBA postseason berth. Folks, that was the only game tonight in the WNBA, and the final score, folks, that made me sweat. It literally did, folks, and I have been still sweating a bit here, perspiring a bit. That's why I've had to get out the cold towel here again. The Sparks pull out a heart-stopping 77-73 victory over the Indiana Fever. The Sparks, with the win, improved their dismal record, which was pretty bad all year, folks. They improved on that record, though, to 12-14 on the season, and now have moved into a tie with the San Antonio Stars for 3rd place in the WNBA Western Conference. The Fever, with the loss, have faltered to 3rd place in the WNBA's Eastern Conference and are now 12-14 and are now 4 games out of 1st place behind 1st place Atlanta. With the loss, the Mystics of Washington have catapulted them for 1st place in the Western Conference. The games tomorrow, a full slate of games, folks, tomorrow morning and in the evening, folks. Tomorrow's schedule, the Sun will be at the Dream at 9 a.m. Washington at New York, 4 o'clock. Chicago at San Antonio, 5 o'clock on ESPN2. Storm at the Shock at 5 o'clock, and of course the Sparks at the Mercury at 7 p.m. also on ESPN2. Chris, other than the Sparks victory, Chris, there was something bigger to play for tonight than the game, Chris, which of course was the Sparks adorning the pink jerseys tonight, Chris, of course, for Breast Cancer Awareness Night, Chris. A night that I have wholeheartedly supported, Chris, in every sport, like the NFL does do every October, Chris, for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Breast Cancer Awareness Month, Chris, because Chris, like I said on the network Twitter page earlier tonight, Chris, that all of us in some fashion have been affected by cancer in some fashion. And I did invite the viewers out there to tweet in some names of any family or friends that you guys may know that have been affected by the disease. I did mention my uncle and aunt have been affected by were affected by cancer, Chris. And it's so awesome, though, man, that the WNBA does their job, of course, with being the lone professional women's athletic league out there, that they do this much great work with these, breast cancer health foundations like Susan G. Komen and Bright Pink, who's now sponsoring the games this year, Chris. It's just so rewarding, Chris, that you see that the fans can go out, that fans can attend the games, and of course that the players get to adorn the pink jerseys and the pink socks, the pink headbands, the pink shoes. It's always good, Chris, and I have lost family members. I'm sure, Chris, I'm sure we've all lost a family member, a friend, to cancer in some fashion, man. And it's just great, though, man, that we see this every July, that every team gets a home game with the pink jerseys, Chris. Your thoughts on, your thoughts on the, on Breast Cancer Awareness Week, Chris, and how much it raises the awareness about the disease, Chris. Your thoughts about Breast Cancer Awareness Week in the WNBA.
A very awesome awareness idea for the WNBA every July to spread the awareness, breast cancer awareness, and just let people lost lives because of cancer, and just a very awesome idea.
Chris, between the WNBA and Major League Baseball and the NFL, Chris, how they players will wear pink socks, pink gloves, pink shoes, pink armbands, or in baseball's case, Chris, using pink bats. Chris, anything that you could sort of do to bring awareness to a disease, Chris. And Chris, the biggest event in San Diego that I know of for breast cancer, Chris, is the Susan G. Komen Breast Cancer 3-Day Walk, Chris. So many of my friends, Chris, have done it. And they say it's the most rewarding and fulfilling experience, Chris, that you're walking 60 miles, Chris, for 3 whole days to bring awareness to a disease, Chris, that touches everybody, Chris. And it's not just, Chris, it's not just breast cancer, Chris. It's prostate cancer for the guys, breast cancer for the women, liver cancer, like my uncle passed away, or my grandfather passed away from, Chris. Anytime, Chris, you can bring up some sort of cancer, raise awareness about it, Chris, and get people to support your effort, man. It's going to go a long way, Chris, and of course with the WNBA doing it as well, man. I marvel a lot, Chris, that when baseball does it, because we always say, Chris, we wouldn't be anywhere without our parents, Chris. Specifically, for one, Chris, none of us would be here without our moms at all, because for one, we wouldn't be here right now talking about the number, Chris, and of course, I wouldn't be where I'm at. I know that you wouldn't be where you're at right now without the help of your mom. And for some people, sometimes, Chris, you're a single parent, single mom. Chris, Candace Parker, of course. Chris, I basically, devote the day of Mother's Day and this week to Candace, Chris, because she's one of the lone athletes, Chris, I know of out there. Not knocking any other pro ones, Chris, but at least the one in the WNBA that I know of, that we know of the best, Chris, that is able to juggle being a mom and a pro athlete at the same time and doing it in LA and overseas, Chris. I pretty much, Chris, devote that whole day or week to Candace Parker, Chris. And the artwork, of course, today was all in pink, as I'll even show you guys as well if I can clear up these. Everyone out there is going crazy after a Sparks win for once at home, folks. But as you folks probably could tell, though, Chris, but I do it every time, too, man. I go pink as well on my phone's lock screen. Mother's Day, Chris, and this time of the year, Chris, I go pink the whole week or the whole day, Chris, because want to raise awareness, Chris, about something. And even like we did this year, Chris, on Father's Day when we changed the profile photos on the Twitter handle for the network, Chris, to blue for prostate cancer, Chris. And I'll say it one more time, Chris, before we move away here. But again, Chris, anytime or Chris, anytime anyone out there can bring awareness to something like cancer, or anything that you want to bring awareness to, Chris, like our petition over the off season, do whatever it takes, Chris, to market that plan. And the WNBA, Chris, has really taken Chris, taken that initiative, Chris, and has ran out my bedroom door with it, Chris, because they've done such a great job where, Chris, everybody, not one specific game, Chris, everybody gets one home game with wearing their pink jerseys. We've seen pretty much, Chris, every player wear a pink headband. They all have their, their pink warm-up shirts, Chris. So, again, man, anytime we can do this as a league, or, Chris, if you and I want to do something about, raising awareness about prostate cancer, take it and run. Do something out there, Chris. Bring awareness, and, Chris, people will support your cause. And, the 6,000 there, Chris, the 6,000 people at Staples tonight, Chris, got a pink rally towel tonight, Chris. So something like this, Chris, and the WNBA, Chris, has done a hell of a job. I will say that right now. I'll say it again, Chris, a HELL hockey stick job with this breast cancer awareness tonight, Chris. And, I can't wait for the NFL to do it again in October, and can't wait again, Chris, for Mother's Day when baseball does it again, Chris. So, again, your last thoughts, though, about tonight's Sparks game involving the pink jerseys again.
A very awesome job for the WNBA on the pink jerseys and spreading awareness on cancer. Very awesome.
Chris, I will up the ante here real quick to the San Antonio Stars, Chris. They have laid down a pink floor at AT&T Center for their upcoming 2 home games, Chris. So they're going beyond the Call of Duty, Chris. Now they're going to have a pink playing floor on their next 2 home games, Chris. So they're really raising the bar, Chris, for as far as it goes with awareness, Chris. And, hats off to the Stars for, above all, Chris, bringing in a special floor that is completely wiped out in pink for their upcoming home games during this week.
Yeah, very great.
So again, folks, a lot of praise and a lot of great, a lot of pats on the backs and a lot of hugs and kisses for the WNBA for what they have done for this whole week for Breast Cancer Awareness Week here throughout the entire WNBA, folks. I continue to wipe myself clean after a very intriguing and very, very flaming hot and sweaty LA Sparks 77-73 victory. Chris, I don't ever recall ever being this damn hot, where I've had to go to a towel on the air here for the last few minutes here, Chris. But, Chris, I mean, I was literally panting. I was out of breath because this game took the air out of my lungs. And it's to the point, Chris, where I'm going after hot soda now, hot water, and going after, having my fan on blast here, Chris. I mean, how are you hanging up there right now after this frickin' just unbelievable win tonight that pretty much put us all in cardiac arrest tonight at Staples Center?
Just right when it was like towards the end, just cardiac arrest. I just put on my Sparks jersey and my fans on blast and everything. And yeah,
it's a scorcher, folks, and I don't know what the remedy will be, folks, to cure the winning fever for the Sparks, but the Sparks do cure the fever. They do get the 77-73 win. They do cause me to throw my towel across my studio because, Chris, this was the first home win for the Sparks, man, in 5 weeks. It took them 5 whole weeks to beat somebody at home, man. So you might as well, have a Coca-Cola shower, throw some towels across your studio, rip your shirt off if you wanted to, man. But do something, Chris, because we can finally celebrate a Sparks win for the first time at home in 5 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, folks, yes, I am going crazy because we have not talked about a Sparks win at home for quite some time. So we are going to go a bit crazy here, real quick here on the LA Sparks 365 Network. Now, folks, real quick as well, this just caught my eye here, folks, on WNBA.com. And, Chris, this actually goes back to what I brought up here about breast cancer awareness, Chris, but a lot of people do not know this. But there is a video, folks, that I will actually link out to you folks on the Spark365 Twitter handle, Chris. And it is about Washington Mystics star player Chris Ivory Lata, who opens up in an interview with Mystics Magazine. She bravely shares, Chris, her story of a recent cancer incident she also had, Chris. So that is one deal as well, man. And you know, Chris, we'll never know about, what some athletes do not choose to disclose. I mean, Chris, I'll say it here, folks, but I also am a partial survivor of cancer as well, because I was also nearly diagnosed with lymphoma in my growing. So, Chris, I get where Ivory comes from, man, but, something one day, Chris, may not look right. You go somewhere to find out, man, and, Chris, I'm very, thankful and blessed that it was not cancer, Chris, but it could have been lymphoma, so I could have also been in a fight for my life as well, man. But, Chris, some athletes, Chris, will never disclose something like this. They won't really tell you about, their home life. They were raised by a single mom living in Anaheim, and their, father completely leaves them in the dust and doesn't even call back or anything like that, like you've kind of gone through with your, 21 years of life, or how I've, I was separated from my parents for a bit. I overcame, borderline lymphoma as well, going through, my battle a little bit with that, Chris. Chris, and there's some things, Chris, that we don't like talking about. I know that you kind of don't like talking about, your upbringing with your parents, and I totally understand that. Nor do I really like talking about, being separated from my family, from my mom and dad, or kind of going through, my small bout with lymphoma, or even, Chris, telling people that I have a disability. I really don't like talking about stuff like that, Chris. And for Ivory, Chris, to come out publicly, but of all, Chris, say this on an exclusive interview, Chris, mad props, Chris, because most athletes, man, won't say anything about their upbringing, Chris, and a lot of credit is due to Ivory, Chris, for coming out and saying that, Chris. And Chris, we all have something that we don't like talking about, even with our closest friends, man. But to know, Chris, that a pro athlete will talk about, that she would talk about something like cancer that nearly killed her, Chris. Mad props all the way.
Yep.
So again, folks, we will link you that video to Ivory Lata's story on our WNBA, or on I should say, on our LA Sparks 65 Twitter handle. Chris, there's not too much else to discuss here, real quick. At this point in time, except there's not a lot going on right now in the WNBA, folks. Because again, there was only one game in the WNBA this evening, folks, which again was a Sparks victory over the Indiana Fever, 77-73. Excuse me, folks, but we'll get to the scores for not scores, but the matchups for tomorrow's games. Again, folks, tomorrow we'll have Connecticut at Atlanta at 9 a.m., Washington at New York at 4 o'clock, Chicago at San Antonio at 5 on ESPN2, part of the doubleheader on Tuesday, Storm at Shock 5 p.m., and of course the Sparks at the Phoenix Mercury 7 p.m. on ESPN2. Then the games on Thursday will be New York at Chicago. And Chris, the matchup I am really the one that I am waiting to see, Chris, but hopefully I'll be able to be home to watch it, or if I'll be in my hotel room in Hawaii, Chris, which will be the Mercury at a full-strength Lynx team, Chris, which could possibly be the end of the Mercury's winning streak, Chris. Hopefully on Thursday. Then we'll have Atlanta at Tulsa 5 p.m., Indiana, Seattle at 7, and Connecticut at San Antonio at 5 o'clock on Friday, August 1st. Now, folks, before we do get out of here for the evening here, we may have one more show. We may have a quick edition of Sparks Fan coming up next, because we know that Chris changed his Twitter handle to LA Sparks Fan 30. We'll get to that, folks. Yeah, you know what? We'll do it, Chris. Chris, we'll do it. I mean, we just came off of a freaking unbelievable win, Chris. We haven't done a show in the forever, so, Chris, we got to bring back the #1 best show, Chris. So we'll bring back Sparks Fan coming up here in a few minutes. But, folks, real quick, to get to the other important news again, folks, involving Thursday. Now, again, folks, I'm going to be leaving San Diego for LAX at 6:20 in the morning on Thursday. And we'll be taking a Delta flight from LA to Honolulu and landing there at about 2:40 PAC time, 11:40 a.m. Hawaiian time, folks. Now, again, the schedule, folks, for our network right now is kind of up in the air tonight. Phil Collins, folks, if you haven't heard that song before, I might want to recommend you guys listen to that song. But anyway, folks, again, right now we are deliberating on possibly, folks, having no coverage for the remainder of the year, folks. Reason being, I do not get back home till the last game of the year, August 16th, when the Sparks take on Phoenix for the last time this year before the postseason starts. So we are working on it, folks, but do not panic. We will have – I'm going to do my absolute best, folks, to try to get some sort of coverage, folks. Now, it might be at midnight pack time, but, folks, remember, I'm 3 hours behind you guys come Thursday, so it'll be 9 o'clock p.m. Hawaiian time, folks. If we'll be up at midnight, you can watch me from my hotel room balcony, perhaps. We have some Sparks coverage, folks, while I'm over there. But, again, folks, Wednesday, folks, will be our final block of shows, our final full day of coverage before we do go on vacation, folks, beginning on the 31st of this month. And there may and or may not be coverage of the team at all, unfortunately. But again, Chris, I need to kind of, for one, enjoy a week off from school and work for one. So at the same time, Chris, I'm going to try my best though to kind of come back with you guys with some sort of coverage on the channel, whether it's at 9 p.m. your time, too, or they're 9 o'clock, or if it's 9 o'clock my time over in Hawaii. So we'll figure that out, Chris, at a later time and date, man. But, folks, if you have not heard as well, Chris, or if you guys don't know why I'm going to Hawaii, for one, it's for vacation, but two, I'm covering a international baseball tournament, folks. And the best part about it, you can watch the tournament live on the air, folks. We're going to deal right now, folks, to get the games put on my personal YouTube channel, folks, which will be the Calamac94 YouTube channel, folks. The games will be live streamed for the first time in 3 years with this tournament I've been covering on the Calamac94 YouTube channel, folks. We'll have more about that, though, when I'm able to finally get my hands on a wireless internet card. So you guys will be able to watch the games live and in full on my channel when the games do roll around, folks. But again, vacation begins the 31st, folks. So again, we will recommend, folks, you guys go to our Twitter handle at LASparks265 for updates from Hawaii about the Sparks and also for my vacation. Okay, folks, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll get a cold towel from the fridge, and we'll come back with the #1 show here on the network, Sparks Fam, following a out-of-breath 77-73 Sparks home victory over the Indiana Fever, folks. Take a break and come back here. Don't go anywhere, folks. Sparks game up next right here on the LA Sparks Network, folks. So please do not go away.